Your cancer is not my problem. That was the last full sentence my husband Brian said to me before he walked out of the kitchen. 5 days after a doctor at Vanderbilt told me I had stage 2B breast cancer. My name is Rebecca Carter. I'm 49 years old. 3.5 years ago, I learned what kind of man I had married while I was still wearing the hospital wristband from my biopsy. That night, I opened our banking app. $87,000 was gone in 72 hours. The memo line on the final transfer was 4 words Brian had typed himself. For a couple treatments. I did not call him back. I did not cry. I walked into my daughter Hannah's bedroom while she was asleep, and I made her one quiet promise I would keep. If you have ever loved someone who only loved you when it was easy, stay with me. Because 3.5 years later, Hannah answered for me at her graduation. And she did not raise her voice once. 3 things to do that morning. The first was drop Hannah at Hume Fogg by 7:15. The second was teach 2 piano lessons before noon. The third was drive across the river to Vanderbilt, because a small lump under my left arm had been growing for 10 weeks. And Dr. Park had told me on the phone, kindly and slowly, that we needed to talk in person. It was December 14th, 2019. Cold for Nashville, 41 degrees. I parked in the garage on Pierce, and I sat in my Ford Escape for 1 minute before I went inside. I counted. 1, 2, 3. Then I opened the door. Dr. Lena Park is a small woman who never decorates bad news. She walked into the exam room at 10:47 a.m., and she said the words exactly the way she had been trained to say them. Stage 2B, triple negative. Aggressive subtype. The lump was a little over 2 centimeters. There was 1 node involved. The plan would be 8 rounds of chemotherapy first, then a double mastectomy, then 33 rounds of radiation. The 5-year survival number she gave me was 77% if I responded well. I remember the wallpaper behind her, pale green with white birds. I remember the small box of tissues she pushed toward me, and the way she did not say anything for almost a full minute while I looked at it. I did not cry. I asked her 2 questions. The first was when treatment would start. She said early January. The second was whether I could keep teaching piano during chemo. She said yes, mostly, on the good weeks. I drove home with the hospital wristband still on. I forgot to take it off. I made dinner. I told Hannah that the doctor had found something, but that we were going to fight it. Hannah was 13. She looked at me the way she looks at a math problem. Calm, steady. She said, "What do you need me to do, Mom?" And I told her, "Just keep being who you are, baby. That's enough." Brian was at the Predators game with 2 clients from Memphis. He came home at 11. I told him the diagnosis in the upstairs hallway in a low voice so Hannah would not hear. He listened. He nodded twice. He said, "We'll figure it out, Becca." Then he went to bed. For 5 days, he did not bring it up again. He went to work. He played golf on Tuesday morning. He sent me 1 text on Wednesday that said, "Hope you're hanging in there." He slept in the guest room and told me it was because he didn't want to wake me when he came in late from showings. I should have understood what 5 days of silence meant. I did not. On Thursday, December 19th, at 6:14 p.m., Brian slid a manila folder across the kitchen table. I was making pasta. The water had not come to a boil yet. He sat down. He cleared his throat. He started with the word look. He said, "Look, I've been thinking about this all week, and I want to be honest with you." He spoke for about 3 minutes. He used the word honestly 4 times. He explained, in the careful sales cadence he used with skittish buyers in the Gulch, that the next 2 years were going to require a level of investment, emotional and financial, that he was not in a position to give. He said he had spoken with a divorce attorney named Greg on Tuesday. He said the papers in the folder were no fault under Tennessee statute and would move faster if I did not contest. He said he was prepared to be generous about the house. I stood at the stove. I did not turn around. I asked him one question. I asked, "When did you decide?" He said, "This morning." I knew he was lying. I knew it was the Tuesday phone call to Greg. I knew it was probably earlier than that. And then he said the 7 words I will hear inside my chest for the rest of my life. He said, "Your cancer is not my problem." He said it the way a man says, "Traffic is bad on I-40. Flat, slightly impatient, like he had already moved past the sentence by the time he finished it. I turned off the burner. I put the wooden spoon on the counter. I did not look at him. He stood up. He picked his keys out of the bowl by the door. The keys made a small sound against the ceramic. He left. The door did not slam. He closed it carefully, the way a real estate broker closes a door at the end of a showing. I sat at the kitchen table with the divorce folder for 18 minutes. The water on the stove had stopped steaming. Pasta still in the box. At 6:52 p.m., I opened our joint banking app on my phone. I had 2 reasons. The first was that I needed to know if he had taken anything yet. The second was that I already knew. The balance was $2,650. 3 days earlier, it had been $87,000. He had moved the money out in 5 transfers across 72 hours. The first 3 transfers were to an account labeled BC Investments. The last transfer was to a checking account I did not recognize at a credit union in Brentwood. The memo line on the final transfer was 4 words he had typed himself. For a couple treatments. Not for treatments. Not for chemo. Not for your treatment, Rebecca. For a couple treatments. Like he was tipping a waiter on his way out. I sat there for another hour. I did not call him. I did not call a lawyer. I did not call my best friend Janelle next door. I went upstairs at 11:47 p.m. I did not turn on the hallway light. I walked into Hannah's room. She had fallen asleep with her algebra book open on her chest, the way she always did when she was trying to read past her bedtime. I sat on the edge of her bed for 2 minutes. I watched her breathe. I thought about all the things a mother thinks at 11:47 p.m. when she has just been told she may have 3 years left and her husband has just walked out the door. Then I leaned down to her ear the way my own mother used to lean down to mine in Brooklyn when I was small. And I made my daughter one quiet promise. 12 words. I did not whisper it. I said it the way Margaret used to say things she meant. You will graduate, and he will not be the reason you almost didn't. I kissed her forehead. I closed her book. I left the room. I did not cry that night. I would not cry for another 9 weeks. By February, my hair came out in clumps in the shower on a Tuesday morning, and I sat on the tile and looked at the clumps in my hand for a long time. And then I stood up and got the clippers out of the bathroom drawer, and I shaved my own head before Hannah came home from school. I did not want her to see it falling out a little at a time. I wanted her to see it gone. By March, my hair was gone. My husband was gone. Our savings were gone. The 3 things he had promised the day he stood in front of a small judge in a courthouse in Lower Manhattan in 2002 and put a ring on my finger were all gone in 12 weeks. I had one thing left. I had a promise I had made to a sleeping girl. That was enough. That had to be enough. The morning after Brian left, I did 3 things. The first was call Dr. Park's office and confirm my port placement for January 7th. The second was call my insurance company and confirm Brian was still on the policy through end of year, because I needed his coverage to bridge into mine. The third was open my mother's jewelry box. Margaret's jewelry box was a cedar thing the size of a paperback book. Inside, there was a wedding ring she had stopped wearing in 1998 when my father died. There was a thin silver chain I had given her for Mother's Day in 7th grade. There was a folded card my grandmother had written in Italian in 1958. And there was the brooch. Gold, 14 karat, 3 emerald cabochons in a row. Designed in Brooklyn in 1962 by a jeweler named Aaron Goldstein, who my grandmother had walked 4 blocks to find. On the back, scratched by hand in careful capital letters, 4 words and a year. M.W. Play 1 piece every day. Mama. 1958. Margaret had worn this brooch every day she taught piano for 52 years. I had never seen her at the piano bench without it. I sat on my bedroom floor and held the brooch in my open palm. I did not cry then either. I made a decision. I was not going to give Brian the satisfaction of becoming the woman he thought he was leaving. I was not going to lose Hannah's senior year. I was not going to lose my students. I was not going to lose the house on Fatherland Street that my mother had helped me put a down payment on with the last of her teaching pension. He had taken 3 things. He was not going to take a 4th. I pinned the brooch to my cardigan. I drove to my first chemotherapy appointment 3 weeks later, wearing it. Dr. Park noticed it in the infusion chair on day 1. She said, "That's beautiful, Rebecca. Who made it?" I said, "A jeweler in Brooklyn. For my grandmother, in 1962. Dr. Park said, "Then it has done this before." I said, "Yes, I think it has." There was no plan in the way a man like Brian would have understood a plan. There were no spreadsheets. There were no calls to attorneys after Greg sent the first round of papers. There was no scheme. There was a schedule. I taught piano on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I taught from 3:15 to 7:30, half-hour slots. 12 students through the spring of 2020, 8 students through the chemo summer when I had to cancel for 2 weeks at a time, 15 students by the fall, 22 students by January of 2021. The students came up the porch steps of the Craftsman on Fatherland Street and sat at the upright Steinway my mother had shipped from Brooklyn in 1996 when she moved in with us for her last 6 years. I taught them how to count. I taught them how to keep their wrists soft. I taught them, mostly, how to come back to the piano after they had stopped for a week. A piano teacher does not teach piano. A piano teacher teaches a person how to fail one measure and start the next measure anyway. That was my plan. I would teach my daughter the same thing by being it. On the metronome at the top of the Steinway, I kept the brooch. I unpinned it from my cardigan when I sat down to teach, and I placed it on the wood next to the metronome. 3 emeralds catching the late afternoon light from the front window. The students saw it every lesson. A girl named Maya, 6 years old, daughter of a nurse at Vanderbilt, looked up at the brooch in March and asked me, in the very serious voice that small children use for questions they have practiced, "Miss Rebecca, is that magic?" I said, "It's older than magic. It's habit." She thought about that for a long moment. She turned back to her scales. I taught Maya how to count out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The way my mother had taught me. Most students count in their head after a year. Maya kept counting out loud. I let her. When Maya left, I would sit at the bench for a few minutes before the next student. I would look at the brooch. I would breathe. Some afternoons, when the chemo was bad and my hands were numb from neuropathy, and I could not feel the keys clearly under my fingers, I would count differently. 1, 2, 3. The way my mother counted measures when she was correcting a student. 1, 2, 3. Margaret never said 1, 2, 3 in the studio, only in Italian. She said the Italian put the rhythm in her hands before her hands had to do anything. The chemo schedule was its own metronome. 8 rounds, 1 every 3 weeks. A C for the first 4, then Taxol weekly for 12. I learned the rhythm of it. The first 3 days after infusion were sleep. The next 4 were nausea, managed by ondansetron, and a clear plastic bin by the bed. The next 10 were a window of almost normal life. Then, the next infusion. Reset. Janelle, my neighbor and my best friend for 19 years, walked over at 5:30 every evening on chemo weeks. She is a hospice social worker. She is good at not being in a hurry. She would sit at the kitchen table with me, and we would not always talk. She would say, to whatever I told her, and she would do the dishes I had not done, and she would leave a Tupperware of greens and rice in the fridge for Hannah's dinner. She did this for 31 Wednesdays in a row. Hannah did not ask me what was happening with her father. She did not ask me where the money had gone. She watched the house, and she figured out what the house needed. She made her own lunches, starting in January. She figured out the laundry sometime in February. She started walking home from Hume Fogg 3 times a week to save the Uber money I had been giving her for the days I was too sick to pick her up. She did not announce any of this. She just did it. I would notice. I would put a hand on her shoulder at the kitchen counter. I would say, "Baby, you don't have to do all this." She would look at me with Brian's pale, blue-gray eyes inside her face, and she would say, in her quiet engineer's voice, "What I know is that you are going to get well, Mom. And then we are going to keep going." She said it like a fact, not like a hope. I would sit at the piano after she went upstairs to study, and I would count. 1, 2, 3. I would look at the brooch on the metronome. I would say, in my head, to the brooch, to my mother, to no one, "You will graduate, Hannah, and he will not be the reason you almost didn't. A promise has to be repeated. A promise that is only said once is a wish. I had 3 things to do that spring. The first was finish chemo. The second was survive the mastectomy in August. The third was teach my students well enough that none of them would have to leave me for another teacher. I did all 3. Not because I was strong, because I was scheduled. The brooch sat on the metronome 3 days a week, through every infusion, through the August surgery, through the radiation that started in September. I never thanked Margaret out loud for it, but I never sat down at the bench without taking the brooch off my cardigan and placing it on the wood. That was the deal she had made me, the way my grandmother had made it with her. Play one piece every day. That was the plan. That was the only plan. The pursuit was not against Brian. The pursuit was against time. By June of 2020, I had finished AC and started Taxol. By August, I had the double mastectomy at St. Thomas West. By October, I was in radiation Monday through Friday at 5:15 p.m. because the only slot the techs could give me with a reasonable waitlist was after the last appointment of the day. Hannah did homework in the hospital waiting room with her engineering textbook open on her lap. The receptionist learned her name. In January of 2021, Dr. Park looked at my PET scan and said the 4-word sentence that every patient memorizes. No evidence of disease. She did not say cured. No oncologist says cured. She said NED, the same way she said good morning. Carefully, without promises. I taught piano. Hannah finished freshman year on a 4.0. She made the cross-country team. She placed 8th at regionals in the fall. She did not talk about her father. He had moved into a condo in the Gulch on January 4th, 2020, 16 days after he left our house. Brittany Hale was 29 years old then and called herself a wellness coach on her Instagram bio. By the end of 2020, she had 22,000 followers and called herself a manifestation strategist. By 2022, she had stopped working for the Pure Barre studio that had hired her, and Brian was paying for everything she posted about. I knew this not because I followed her. I had blocked her in January of 2020. I knew this because Janelle's niece, who is 17, kept track of Brittany's account and would occasionally tell Janelle, who would occasionally tell me, the way you tell a friend the weather in a city she used to live in. Distantly. Without commentary. Brian sent court-ordered child support on the 1st of every month for the first 18 months. Then it became the 5th. Then the 10th. Twice in 2022, it came on the 22nd. I did not call him. I did not call my attorney about it. I added it to the pile of small things he had become. He saw Hannah twice in those 3.5 years. Once at a Predators game in March of 2021, where she went because he had bought the tickets and her therapist had told her not to refuse an invitation from her father, if she could tolerate it. She came home and said, "Mom, he asked me 3 times if I was eating." I said, "What did you tell him?" She said, "I told him I was. He didn't ask anything else." The second time was a coffee on 12th Avenue South in May of 2022. He told her he had been thinking about her a lot. He asked her what colleges she was looking at. She said, Michigan. He said, "That's a long way from home, princess." She said, "I know." He paid for the coffee. He hugged her on the sidewalk. He told her he loved her. She came home and went upstairs and closed her bedroom door. and she did not come downstairs for dinner. I let her have the night alone. The next morning, I made eggs. She came down. She sat at the counter. She said in her quiet voice, "What I know is that I don't want to do that again until I'm ready." I said, "Okay, baby." I said, "That's an okay thing to know." She did not see him again until graduation. Hannah became the salutatorian of Hume Fogg Academic Magnet High School in the spring of 2023. She got into the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan with a partial scholarship. She was awarded a Tau Beta Pi pre-college honor pin. She accepted the Michigan offer on April 19th. That was when the math caught up with me. I had survived chemo. I had survived the surgery. I had survived 2 years of teaching at a reduced schedule. I had not survived the bills. The mastectomy had been covered by insurance, but the reconstruction was not. And the lymphedema therapy that began in November of 2021 cost me $4,200 out of pocket across the next year because the specialist I needed was not in network. The radiation copays added up to $3,100. Hannah's college deposit was $1,847 and due May 15th. I had $9,300 in savings in October of 2022. By the second week of November, I had run the numbers 11 different ways with a pencil at the kitchen table, and the numbers did not work. I had 3 options. The first was to ask Brian, through my attorney, for a one-time contribution toward Hannah's deposit. The second was to take a home equity loan that would cost me $480 a month for the next 9 years on a house I had nearly paid off. The third was the option I did not want to think about. I thought about it anyway. I had been thinking about it for a week. On Sunday, November 13th, 2022, I sat at the piano bench at 8 in the evening after Hannah had gone upstairs to study. I unpinned the brooch from my cardigan. I held it in my open palm. 3 emerald cabochons, 14-karat gold. Aaron Goldstein, Brooklyn, 1962. Margaret Whitfield, every day from her wedding to her funeral. Mama, 1958. I said in Italian to my mother, who had been dead 8 years and 7 months, "I'm sorry." Then I went to bed. I did not sleep. 3 things to do on the morning of November 14th, 2022. The first was teach Maya at 3:15. The second was drive to Charlotte Avenue. The third was come home before Hannah got out of cross-country practice at 5:30 so that she would not ask me where I had been. Belle's Pawn Shop sat between a tire shop and a Salvadoran bakery on the south side of Charlotte. The sign was hand-painted. The window had a guitar in it, a pulsar watch, and a child's bicycle. I parked across the street. I sat in the Ford Escape for 2 minutes. I counted. 1, 2, 3. The man behind the counter was tall and gray and dressed in a button-down shirt the color of slate. He had reading glasses on a beaded chain. A Latin textbook was open next to the register. He looked at me over the top of the glasses when I came in. He said, "Good afternoon, ma'am." I said, "Mr. Bell?" He said, "Yes." I said, "My name is Rebecca Carter. I think you know my neighbor, Janelle Robinson." He said, "Damon's wife." "Yes, I do." I took the brooch out of the velvet box and laid it on the glass counter. He did not pick it up right away. He looked at it. Then he picked it up the way a man picks up a thing he has been trained to evaluate without insulting it. He turned it over. He read the inscription. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then he looked at me over the top of the glasses again. He said, "Mrs. Carter, this piece. This is your mother's." I said, "My mother's mother's. Then my mother's. Now mine." He said, "I'd be doing you a disservice if I gave you less than this is worth." The appraisal on a piece like this, given the maker and the era, is $11,800. I can't pay that. I can pay $4,300. That's what the shop can carry. I said, "That's fine." He said, "Ma'am, I'll hold this for 90 days before it goes on display. If you can come back inside 90 days, I will sell it back to you at $4,500. That's the best I can do." I said, "I appreciate that, Mr. Bell. I don't think 90 days will be enough." He nodded once. He filled out a ticket. He paid me $4,300 in cash from a small fireproof box behind the counter. He put the brooch in a velvet pouch and the pouch in a small drawer underneath the register. He did not put it in the window. I thanked him. I walked out. I sat in the Ford Escape for 12 minutes. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I just breathed. I had 3 things to do, and I had done the second one, and I needed to be home before the third one happened. I had survived 8 rounds of chemotherapy. I had survived watching my own husband write a memo line about my treatments like he was tipping a waiter. I had survived 3 Christmases alone with my daughter, pretending I was fine. But I could not survive what I had just done. My mother's brooch had been on every dresser she had ever owned for 56 years, and I had just left it in a shop on Charlotte Avenue because a man I once trusted had decided my life was not worth the math. That night, after Hannah went upstairs, I sat at the piano. I did not play. I looked at the metronome, where the brooch had sat for 35 months. The metronome looked smaller without it. I said to my mother, in English this time, because I did not have the Italian in me anymore that night, "I will get it back. I do not know when. I will get it back." I did not get it back. I never got it back. I never had the money. I never went back to Charlotte Avenue. The 90 days came and went. I told myself the brooch was an object, and an object is not a person, and a person is not lost when an object leaves a house. I told myself this for 6 months. I did not fully believe it. What I did not know on the night of November 14th was that Hannah had been keeping her own pencil math on her own kitchen table for almost a year. She had a savings jar. She had a summer job tutoring SAT prep. She had a small Google Sheet on her laptop, password protected, that she had named, in her practical engineer's way, Project Brooch. I did not know any of that yet. I would not know any of it for 9 more months. May 25th, 2023, 6 p.m. Polk Theater at the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. 411 people in the audience. The seniors of Hume Fogg Academic Magnet High School filed onto the stage in royal blue gowns, and the third one, in the second row, was my daughter. I sat in row M on the aisle. Janelle sat next to me. Dr. Park sat 2 rows back because she had asked for the date and I had given it to her. Brian sat in row G with Brittany. He wore a cream linen blazer. She wore a bodycon dress the color of champagne and 4-inch heels she could not walk in on carpet. She had her phone in her hand from the moment she sat down. I knew they were there. Hannah had told me, that morning at the kitchen table, that her father had asked for 2 tickets. She had given them to him. She had said, in her quiet voice, "What I know is that I have a speech to give, Mom, and I'd rather give it once than have him in the parking lot afterward asking why he wasn't there." I said, "That's an okay thing to know." I had 3 things to do that night, and the first was not to look at him. I kept that one. Hannah's salutatorian speech was 3 minutes and 41 seconds long. I had heard her practice it twice in the living room. She had revised the 3rd paragraph the morning of the ceremony. She walked to the podium with her shoulders back, and she adjusted the microphone the way she adjusted a music stand at the piano, with precision and no drama. She looked at the audience. She did not look at her father. She thanked her teachers. She thanked the friends in the front row, 2 boys and a girl who had been her study group since junior year. She thanked the cross-country coach. Then she paused, and she said this: "I want to thank one more person. I want to thank the piano teacher who taught me when I was 6 years old that practice is love made visible. She taught me that you do not always get to feel like sitting down at the bench. She taught me that you do it anyway. She taught me that a measure ends and another measure begins, and the only thing you owe the next measure is your hands. She has been my teacher for 17 years. She is the reason I am standing here. Anything else I become because of her." She did not say the word mother. She did not have to. I felt Janelle's hand on mine. I did not move. I did not look at row G. I did not need to. I had been the audience for that speech long before this room had been built. Hannah finished. The auditorium stood. The applause was 43 seconds, which is a long time when you are counting. I counted. I counted in 3s. The ceremony ended at 7:12. The reception was on the plaza outside the lobby. The seniors came out in groups, still in their gowns, looking for parents. Hannah found me on the steps. She hugged me the way she had hugged me at 13, before any of this had started. She said in my ear, "You doing okay, Mom?" I said, "I'm doing okay, baby." That was when Brian and Brittany came across the plaza. He came up to us with the wide salesman smile. He said, "Princess." He said, "That was incredible." He said, "Your old man is so proud of you." Brittany held up her phone. She said, "Can I get one of you and your dad, Hannah, real quick?" The phone was filming. The little red dot was on. Hannah did not answer. She looked at her father. She looked at the phone. She looked back at her father. Brian said, "Hey, sweetheart, come with us. We have something for you out in the lot. It's a graduation gift." The Tesla Model 3 was parked in the second row of the TPAC garage on the level marked B1. It was red. It had a white satin bow on the hood. Brittany was already moving toward it, with her phone held out at chest height. The little red dot was still on. The Instagram live counter in the corner of her screen said 1,300 and rising. Brian held out the key fob. He dangled it between his thumb and forefinger. He said, "Princess, this is yours." He said, "Stanford or Michigan, you're going to need a car." He said, "Your old man wanted to do this right." Hannah did not move. She did not reach for the fob. She did not say anything. She looked at her father. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. I counted. I had time. In the first second, Brian smiled the wide salesman's smile. He had practiced that smile on buyers for 20 years. He believed in that smile. He still believed in it. In the second second, the smile froze. The corners of his mouth stayed up, but the rest of his face stopped following them. Brittany was still filming. The counter said 1,400. He waited for Hannah to take the fob. She did not take the fob. In the third second, his eyes changed. I have known his face for 26 years. I have seen every expression it can make. I had not seen this one. Brian Carter, who had walked out of my kitchen on December 19th, 2019, with a divorce folder and 7 flat words, understood in that third second that the script was not the script he had brought. Hannah said, quietly, in the voice she had built over 3.5 years of watching her mother count in threes at a piano bench, "I'm not going to take that, Dad." She said, "What I know is that my mother taught me how to walk into a room I have earned. I don't need a car to do it." Brittany was still filming. The counter said 1,600. Brittany said, "Babe?" Brian did not answer her. Hannah raised her right hand to her collar, pinned to the royal blue lapel of her graduation gown, exactly where Margaret had worn it for 52 years. 3 emerald cabochons caught the fluorescent light of the parking garage. Brittany's phone zoomed in. The Instagram count jumped to 2,000, then 3, then 5. Hannah said, "This belonged to my grandmother, and to her mother before her. It is not for sale. It has never been for sale." She did not raise her voice. She did not look at her father once during that sentence. She looked at the phone. She looked at the woman holding the phone. She said it to the camera. She said it to 22,000 strangers who had been watching her father's new life all afternoon. Then she turned to me. She said, "Mom, let's go home." Brian's face went blank. I will tell you what blank looks like on the man I was married to for 21 years, because the camera caught it, and because 50,000 people would watch it over the next 24 hours, and because I have watched it myself. His eyebrows did not move. His mouth opened about 0.5 centimeter and stayed there. His right hand, the one holding the Tesla fob, lowered 5 inches without him deciding to lower it. His eyes were not on Hannah. His eyes were on the brooch. He could not seem to look away from the brooch. Brittany said, "Babe," again. He did not answer her for 4 seconds. Then 5. Then 6. He had Hannah's eyes. Or, more honestly, she had his. Pale blue-gray, the only thing she had taken from him. When she looked at him in that parking garage, he saw his own eyes inside a face he no longer knew. I took Hannah's hand. We walked across the garage. Janelle was waiting at the Ford Escape on B2. Behind us, somewhere on level B1, a man in a cream blazer was still standing next to a red car with a satin bow on it. Hannah did not say anything in the car for the first 10 minutes. Then she said, very quietly, "Mom, I should tell you something. I said, okay, baby. She said, the brooch. I should have told you. I got it back last fall. I did not say anything for a long moment. I just drove. Then I said, Hannah. She said, I went to Mr. Bell in October with the tutoring money. He had been holding it. He told me what you paid. He told me what he had to charge. I had $5,100. He said that was enough. He gave it to me. He said to give it to you when the time was right. I said, you have been carrying that for 7 months. She said, what I know is that I wanted you to see it on me first. Tonight. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know how to give it back without you giving it away again. I did not respond for a long time. I just drove. I drove across the Cumberland on the John Siegenthaler Bridge. The river was the color of the early evening sky. I said finally, baby, that is the only way you could have given it back. She put her head on my shoulder for 1 block. Then she sat up straight again, because she is her mother's daughter and her grandmother's grandmother's, and because we do not stay folded for long. I did not file anything against Brian after the graduation. I did not write to Brittany's followers. I did not respond to the 3 voicemails Brian left in the next 4 days, the first of which began with the word look, and the third of which began with the word honestly. I did not answer his email. I did not call my attorney. I taught piano on Monday. I taught Maya at 3:15. She is 9 now. She has been my student for 3.5 years. She does not count out loud anymore. She counts in her head. The brooch stayed pinned to my cardigan all summer. I did not take it off, even when I taught. The metronome on top of the Steinway sat empty for the first time since 2020. I let it sit empty. The brooch belonged on a person. It had earned that. Hannah worked at a Kumon tutoring center on Thompson Lane all summer. She made $11 an hour. She put most of it into her Michigan account. She made dinner on the nights I had late students. She read engineering textbooks on the front porch in the evenings. She did not mention her father. He sent her a wire transfer of $20,000 on June 3rd. She wrote him an email that said, "Thank you, but I will not be cashing this." She did not tell me about the email until July. She told me the way she tells me most things now. At the kitchen counter, in one sentence, quietly. I asked her if she wanted to talk about him at any point. She said, "What I know is that I might want to, one day, but not yet." I said, "Okay, baby. That's an okay thing to know." On August 28th, 2023, I turned 50. Hannah baked a cake. She is not a baker. She followed the recipe on the back of a Hershey's cocoa tin, and the cake came out flat in the middle and high at the edges, the way her mathematical mind would have predicted if she had thought about the chemistry of leavening. She put 50 candles on it anyway. She lit them. She sang to me at the kitchen table in her quiet voice. Janelle was there. Dr. Park was there. Maya and her mother had dropped off a card at 4 p.m. and gone home for dinner. After the cake, Hannah took an envelope out of her back pocket. She handed it to me. She said, "Mom, I want you to know something before I leave for Michigan." Inside the envelope was a receipt from Bell's Pawn Shop, dated October 11th, 2022. The line item said, "Brooch, gold and emerald, 3 stones, vintage." The price was $5,100. The receipt was signed by Marcus Bell in careful blue ink. At the bottom, in his cursive, he had written, "For Mrs. Carter, when she is ready." Hannah said, "I worked 20 hours a week for 19 months, $8 an hour through sophomore year, 11 through junior. I did not buy lunch out. I did not buy a prom dress. Janelle's niece lent me one. I did not buy a yearbook. I bought one thing. I bought it because you would not buy it back for yourself. And I knew you wouldn't. I did not cry then either. I had not cried in 3.5 years, except once, in a shower in 2020, when my hair came out in clumps. I did not cry now. I unpinned the brooch from my cardigan. I held it in my open palm. I looked at my daughter. I said, "Do you remember what I said to you the night your father left?" She said, "You said I would graduate, and that he would not be the reason I almost didn't." I said, "You remember that?" She said, "What I know is that you said it in my doorway at 11:47 p.m. I was not fully asleep. I have remembered every word of it for 3.5 years. I did not respond right away. I put the brooch back on my cardigan. I sat with my hand on my chest over the brooch for a long moment. Janelle was crying quietly across the table. Dr. Park was looking at the cake the way she looks at a PET scan. Carefully, without promises. I said, "Baby, your grandmother kept her promise." Her mother kept her promise. I kept mine. Now you have kept yours. And you did not even tell me you had made one. Hannah said, "What I know is that we are not the kind of family that needs to say everything out loud." She left for Ann Arbor on August 30th. I drove her halfway to a Cracker Barrel outside Louisville, Kentucky, where Janelle's brother lives, and he drove her the rest of the way the next morning so I could come home and teach my Tuesday students. Hannah hugged me in the parking lot at Cracker Barrel. She said, in my ear, the same words I had said to her in her bedroom 3.5 years and 8 months earlier. She said, "You'll be okay, Mom. He will not be the reason you almost weren't." I drove home alone. I cried for the first time in 3.5 years on the I-65 North Bridge over the Cumberland River, where the early morning sun was hitting the water on the right side of the car, and I could not see it through the wet on my face. I cried for 9 minutes. I counted. 1, 2, 3. I counted my way back into the rhythm of the car. I got home. I unpacked. I taught Maya at 3:15. The brooch sat on the metronome that afternoon, the way it had for 35 months before I sold it and 7 months after Hannah brought it back. Maya looked up from her scales. She said, "Miss Rebecca, is that still magic?" I said, "Baby, I told you what it was." She said, "You said it was older than magic. You said it was habit." I said, "That's right." I said, "Can you remind me what comes after the C major scale?" She said, "The A minor." I said, "Then play it for me. One measure at a time." She played. I listened. I did not say anything for the rest of the lesson, because there was nothing to say that the piano was not saying better. Margaret had taught my grandmother. My grandmother had taught Margaret. Margaret had taught me. I had taught Hannah. Hannah had bought the brooch back with money she earned from teaching other people's children to take a standardized test. A man named Brian had walked out of a kitchen in East Nashville on December 19th, 2019, and had said on his way out, "Your cancer is not my problem." He had been right about one thing. It was not his problem. It was mine. And then it was Hannah's. And the only thing he ever owned in our story was the door he closed on his way out of it. That is not a tragedy. That is a math problem he had not finished working when he started. Maya finished the A minor scale. She looked up. She said, "Miss Rebecca, that was clean." I said, "Yes, baby, that was clean. Let's do it again." She did it again. The brooch caught the late afternoon light on the metronome. I did not say anything else.